Hi, I'm Brian Russell. Welcome back to class. I want to go over with you a translation of the Hebrew text of Deuteronomy 30:15 to 20. So I invite you to turn there in your text. All right, verse 15. And this picks up, this is kind of the concluding call of these key verses where God, through Moses, calls God's people to a decision about faithfulness. We're going to see a lot of the same vocabulary that we've seen in previous passages that we've looked at. I'm going to try to point things out. I do want to note in this context, which is important, we saw this in chapter 10 the first time, but we want to note that if you go to verse 6, you have back in chapter 10 it said circumcise your own hearts. Notice in verse 6 it actually says Yahweh your God. This is a perfect with Vav consecutive. Yahweh your God will circumcise your heart and the heart of your offspring to love him. So we see that promise, that God's promising to do a work. And so what does Israel have to do now? They have to come to a decision. And this is a key insight. It's one thing to think about something. It's a totally different thing to actually hear something, ponder something, and then take decisive action. And this is the call to action that we see in Deuteronomy. So let's see how this goes. Starts off in verse 15. Re'eh. This is a imperative, second masculine singular from ra'ah. So it starts off look, watch, see. Great way to start off a call to decision. Followed by just a straight perfect from Natan. Notice the noon's assimilated into the tav ending. This is your first common singular perfect ending. So see, I have given, or I have put, I have set, lifneka, preposition before you, hayom, that characteristic expression we've seen in Deuteronomy, the day, literally today. Notice the text critical mark here. I want to take a look at this one. It suggests here, if we go up here, this is the sign for the Samaritan Pentateuch. It means it's lacking in the Samaritan Pentateuch. That's not particularly significant for our purposes, but you do want to note that. So, set before you today, eth hachayim, life, va'eth hatov, and the good, va'et hamavet, the opposite of life, death, va'eth hara, and evil. So I've set before you today, I've placed before you today life and good, and death and evil. And now here, notice, this is interesting, that we have another footnote in this place. This literally starts off with a relative pronoun, like what's the antecedent? Which I am commanding you today. So it's interesting that it starts off here. And so if you look at the text critical mark here, this is a longer one. Notice that certain manuscripts of the old Greek translation that are the full codices, like for example, if you look at we have Codex from Sinaiticus, actually adds at the beginning, and if you don't know Greek, eis akuses, you will obey the commands, kuria, of Yahweh, Lord, your God. And then that kind of makes sense. And then it picks up, which I am commanding you today, right? To love Yahweh, your God, to walk in his ways, and to keep his commands and his statutes and his judgments. You will live and you will multiply, and you will, and Yahweh your God will bless you in the land which you are going there in order to possess it. Okay, let's walk back through there a little bit. So let's take a look at the quick text critical notes here. First of all, let's look at this one. We have the bait. Now this is a lengthy note. Notice that in this case, what it's saying is, if you look over here, some manuscripts, it has certain manuscripts, the Samaritan Pentateuch, the Septuagint, the Syriac, Targums, Vulgate, they add a vav to the front, and they want you to compare that. So that's interesting, but not particularly significant. C, this was in his ways. Notice certain manuscripts, the Old Greek has in all of his ways. So they're suggesting, again, based on other parts of Deuteronomy, to add an extra word, vakol. Again, that's you can see why a scribe would add that, but you can't actually see why anybody would take that out. Then we have D, another added word in here. Notice that the Samaritan Pentateuch has a vav on the front of this. and then an E, suggesting that this should be deleted from E to, let's see, where's the other, E to E. So this is perhaps deleted. F, Yahweh, your God, or Yahweh God, and so certain texts just has Elohim instead of Elohei-Ka. All right, so that's kind of interesting there. So let's go back and look at this whole verse and make sure we understand the Hebrew. I wanted to point out especially this first one. I think that's probably the most important of the textual variants. So, which I am commanding you. Here we have a pe'el participle, masculine singular, right? And it's got the suffix for its object. I am commanding you from mitzvah today. Here we have a infinitive from ahav, a call infinitive construct, to love, and this is probably purpose. I'm commanding you to love for the purpose of loving Yahweh, your God. What's the purpose of loving Yahweh your God? Or how do you love Yahweh your God? This could be a place where it could be in order to walk in his ways. It could also be by walking in his ways. That'd be like the modal use, and that makes a lot of sense here. By keeping his commands and his statutes and his judgments. And then here we have notice a perfect with vav consecutive, and this probably ends up being purpose too, so that you will live and you will multiply, and Yahweh, your God, will bless you in the land which you. This could be a perfect, or it could be a participle. With the middle weak verbs look the same. I think from context, this is probably participle because I would suggest that it's actually emphasizing this ongoing action, which you are going there to where you are going in order to take possession. This is a first yod verb, yarash, balastav, you lose the yod at the front, and then it has a third feminine singular suffix on it. That's going back to talk about land in order to possess it. So that's verse 16. Verse 17 gives a conditional phrase. And so if your heart turns away, call imperfect from panah. So if your heart turns, and what's it mean that your heart turns? And tishma, call imperfect from shema, and you do not listen, this could be translated obey, because to hear something is to do it, and you will not listen. So if your heart turns away and you do not listen, then you will, no, this is nifal, right? So this is from nada, nifal. You will be driven away, right? If it's call, it's banish, drive away. Since it's nifal, there's a passive tense here. You will be banished, and you will bow down and worship to other gods, and you will serve them. So that's a pretty powerful phrase and call to Israel to make sure that they're going to be faithful. And so you see real consequences there in Deuteronomy. So listen even to I want you to hear how the New Revised Standard actually translates these first couple of verses just to get a feel for this. See, I've set before you today life and prosperity, death and adversity. If you obey the commandments of the Lord your God that I'm commanding you today, by loving the Lord your God, walking in his ways, and observing his commandments, decrees, and ordinances. Now notice in the NRSV, it actually adds that first text note in front of the Asher that we talked about. So I think that's important to see that. Then you shall live and become numerous, and Lord your God will bless you in the land that you're entering to possess. But if your heart turns away and you do not hear, but you are led astray to bow down to other gods and serve them, right? And so there's the big turn there, that if they're not going to be faithful, they're going to, if they turn aside and worship other gods and bow down and serve them, and then what's going to happen? Notice a strong word. I declare to you today, right? This is from Nagad to Hifil. It's a first noon verb. The noon assimilates, but this is a Hifil, perfect first common singular. For, so I declare you today, not for that. Now, this is an infinitive absolute, right? Followed by an perfect of the same root. I declare to you today that you will surely perish. Powerful. And you will not be long many days on the land which you, Atah, are passing over Ha-Yarden, the Jordan, to enter it in order to possess it, right? So notice this again, this long thing. If your heart turns and you do not listen, and you are banished and you worship other gods and serve them, I declare to you today that you will surely perish, and you will not be long many days upon the land, the earth, which you are passing over the Jordan or crossing through the Jordan in order to enter it and to enter there in order to possess it. And 19 is kind of winding this whole thing up. Okay, I testify against you today, or I call to witnesses, right? Testify today, the heavens and the earth. Life, and I have set before you life and death before you, the blessing and the curse. So, now here we have a perfect plus vav consecutive. And so this is, I think this turns into an imperative. I would almost say this is like a causal movement here. So choose, and what you choose is always marked with a preposition bait. Choose life so that, or with the result of, you will live and your offspring. Look at that emphatic language. You will live. So I think this is so powerful. This whole book of Deuteronomy, it has this heightened call to faithfulness. But what's the whole purpose of faithfulness? It's not simply so we earn something. It's so that God wants the best for God's people. He says, choose life. Choose life. And what's that look like? By loving Yahweh your God, infinitive. By listening to his voice, by hearing his voice. And here's another one of those languages of faithfulness. And by clinging to him, for he is your life and length of your days, in order to dwell upon the land which Yahweh swore, Nephal, perfect, third masculine singular from Shavah, swore. Yahweh swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob. There's the trinity of ancestors in order to give to them. Again, this is walking through Deuteronomy 30, verses 15 to 20. If you have any questions, let me know. Again, I'm Brian Russell. Thank you for listening. It's my absolute privilege to serve you in this video, and I look forward to seeing you in another video.